Finally, the orange crowd can sit down here in Brooklyn. 4 minutes gone by, and the Cuse cuts it to a 9-3 Texas advantage.
That orange fan base was on its feet a lot of the second half. Junior J.J. Starling came off a near 40-point performance in Sunday's win over Youngstown State, Saturday's win over Youngstown State, and yet the bucket didn't seem to phase a debut for a UT guard.
A quick trigger three on the far side falls for Tremont Mark. First bucket in a Texas jersey. It is 14-3, double-digit lead early for Texas. 14 minutes left in the first half.
Arkansas transfer Tremont Mark missed the first 4 games due to an ankle injury. Texas continued to build its lead throughout the first half, but SU also has a new face who knows how to knock down shots.
3 steps behind the left wing circle. Up top, Freeman. He shimmies. Now he takes it down the right lane line. Through contact, gets it off the square and down. Thought there should have been a foul. Instead, it's just 2 points. 33-21, the Texas advantage. 4.5 to play first half.
The freshman finished the first half with 7 points, shooting 75% from the field. Donnie Freeman's been really good. While Freeman was impressive early on, a Longhorns freshman stole the spotlight right back.
Texas out of the inbound. Johnson fades away baseline and rolls it home. Turns to the Syracuse bench and has a few words as he makes a fadeaway from 15 feet. Back to a 16-point advantage, 2.5 till the break.
Freshman Trey Johnson leads UT with nearly 24 points per game this season. We talk about Donnie Freeman being impressive. 24 points per game as a freshman is wild. Well, the first half was all about Texas. A second half surge from a Syracuse big got the Cuse rolling, and they almost came back in.
Lampkin passes left to Starling, top of the arc. Orange attacking the left hoop. Passes off Bell, who picks up his dribble and feeds far short corner. Davis gets it down low. Lampkin and one. Lampkin bullies the freshman Trey Johnson. Back-to-back makes for number 44. And the Orange back within single digits. 50-41. 6 minutes into the second half.
Fifth-year Eddie Lampkin hit his free throw to cut the lead to 8 for the first time since 5 minutes of the first half. And after 7 unanswered points from the center, the Orange defense started to ride that momentum too. All right, junior Chris Bell had a huge block at that point, and Syracuse was looking for momentum in this game. We actually have the Chris Bell block, and we'll play it for you right now.
Starling catches left elbow, down low, Lampkin all alone. He slams the ball into the hardwood with the one-handed dunk. Timeout, Rodney Terry. 7-0 run for the Cuse. It's all Eddie Lampkin. They're within 6.
Just got a high five from Mello on his way back to the bench.
Kyan and Carmelo, they like what they see. Timeout on the floor. Will take one as well as Syracuse has found new life after halftime.
Kyan and Carmelo giving you high fives inside the Barclays Center and NBA Arena. That's pretty cool. Not much that can beat that. The game-tying bucket came for J.J. Starling, though. That came a little bit later on.
Barclays on its feet. Pope, turnaround shot. Cannot silence Fitz crowd. Second chance. In and out of the hands of Shedrick for Texas. He screams in frustration as Starling races up the floor. The runner rolls in off the glass. Back-to-back buckets for Starling. He's got 12, and for the first time in this game since it was 0-0, we're tied.
The game-tying bucket also gave J.J. Starling a team-high 14 points. The lead changed hands 3 straight times after that, and with tensions higher than ever, the Longhorns made a crucial mistake.
Far side, Johnson doubled, tosses. Shedrick, one-on-one. Davis goes up with it, and he traveled. He turned towards the hoop, defended by Davis, and he traveled, turning it over. The Orange get it back, and Davis hypes up the crowd.
That was just the first and only travel call of the entire game for either side. Normally they come in pretty crucial moments. Texas started to slightly pull away in the final minute of play, but all reliable for Syracuse kept the Orange in striking distance.
Starling races up the floor, his team down 5, under 20 seconds to go. Starling pulls up for 2, he makes it from the far short corner. Starling, it only takes him 5 seconds to bring the game right back to where it was before he fouled Johnson. Timeout on the floor as it's 68 Texas, 65 Syracuse, under 16 seconds to go.
Despite the late bucket, SU simply couldn't overcome the UT lead in the final seconds of the game.
Under 8 on the clock. Under 6. Taylor pulls up for 3. Too strong from the right wing. Game, set, match. Texas survives a Syracuse second half rally and holds on in night 1 from Brooklyn in the Legends Classic, 70-66.
It's been more than 20 years since Syracuse and Texas had its only meeting prior to tonight, and today Texas got its revenge, a 70-66 win over the Cuse. And that brings SU to 3-1 on the season. It's time for the Pepsi Player of the Game. I know you've been sitting in your car, maybe you've been sitting at home listening along and wondering who it could be. Arthur Kaluma gets the Pepsi Player of the Game tonight. 16 points. He fouled out late. That really could have swung things. I think that could have maybe lost him the Pepsi Player of the Game if Syracuse went on to win. But 6 of 11 shooting and 4 for 4 from the free throw line on a night where that was really epitomized as a very important statistic. Syracuse could not overcome its struggles from the line. Take a look at those, or take a listen, I should say. 9 of 18, 50% from the stripe on the evening. Really not a great look for a Cuse team that struggled from the free throw line all season. Tonight, it bit them. They fall for the first time this year. Our next broadcast comes tomorrow, so you don't have to wait too long. Syracuse will either take on St. Joe's or Texas Tech. They'll take on the loser of that game, which should be just about ready to get underway in about 10 minutes or so. That game will be at 7 o'clock. WAER is on the air at 6:30 with countdown to tip-off. We hope that you'll join us as SU tries to go for third place tomorrow back from Barclays Center. Got a couple of thank yous to hand out to our producer, Ryan Randoni, our engineer, Jonah Weintraub, on radio replay, Evan Edmiston, and the entire WAER Sports desk. I've been Luke Burgess with you throughout tonight's matchup. One final time, Texas beats SU 70-66. We still got the double overtime. That's going all the way up until 11 o'clock, so more than an hour and a half. That gives you plenty of time to call in 315-443-2011 or text us 315-556-3929. You can also interact with us on our social medias, Twitter. We've got a stream on YouTube, all sorts of things. They're doing great work over there at WAER Sports Talk. Jordan Leonard and Hudson Ridley, the two guys who you're going to hear break it all down here on the double overtime coming up for the next hour and a half. It's exciting stuff. Syracuse falls tonight. Maybe you want to vent some of your frustrations about how SU finishes this one. Maybe you want to talk about how SU can play a lot of close games against a lot of different teams. Either way, you can talk to them right now. Guys, a thrilling matchup at Barclays Center. SU almost comes back and outscores Texas in the second half.
Yeah, Luke, you talked about venting frustrations. Hudson, I'm going to vent some frustrations about the free throw shooting. That was absolutely atrocious. If they make some free throws, they potentially win a game that they were down by 11 at halftime.
I don't even think that's potentially. I think if you hit your free throws, if you hit over a 50% clip when you come in under 300 in the country in free throw shooting at Syracuse, I mean, come on. They would have won that game.
As some people say, hashtag free throws matter in basketball. We got that. Talking defense first half to second half. We got our talk reporter, Tyler Aitken, joining the show from the Barclays Center a little bit later. All that and more on the double overtime, which starts right now.
The game may be over, but our coverage on WAER is not. Here on the double overtime, we'll be breaking down all the highs.
Copeland, left wing three! It's good! Quadir Copeland wins the game for Syracuse! For the first time in 1,856 days, Syracuse beats an AP top 10 team.
Darling drives to his right, puts up a layup. No, but Copeland with the putback slam! Oh my goodness, Quadir Copeland makes a statement!
And the lows.
Syracuse walked into John Paul Jones Arena looking to make a statement, and Virginia said, oh no you don't. Cavaliers 84, Orange 62 your final.
Well, Syracuse heads into North Carolina and faces its worst loss in its history in the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Heartbreaking. The Orange bow out in the second round of the ACC tournament for the second year in a row.
Delivering our hottest takes along the way.
The expectations should be higher after a few years when Adrian Autry sets that bar, but the bar is still low.
5-star, Donnie Freeman. I mean, this guy has the tools. I think he could be the truth.
I think Lampkin and the combination of him and Carlos will rejuvenize this team and make them an actual complete basketball team.
Get your voice heard by calling in at 315-443-2011 or check out our YouTube at WAER Sports Talk. It's the double overtime, and it starts right now.
Welcome into the double overtime here on WAER. Syracuse falls to Texas 70-66 down at the Barclays Center alongside Hudson Ridley. I'm Jordan Leonard. We got you all the way up until 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Call in 315-443-2011. You can text us 315-556-3929. Check us out on Twitter and YouTube at WAER Sports Talk. And Hudson, there's a lot to get to. It's SU down by 11 at halftime. They come all the way back. But the reason they lost this game, the free throws, like we mentioned in the pre-open, absolutely horrendous.
Exactly. This is kind of the first time where it felt like there were times where they were doing everything right almost. The offense was clicking, the defense, and they started playing better man-to-man. You went, wow, this team is making a comeback. They're showing heart. Let's try to, see if they can put this thing away. Oh, but there is one massive thing, is that all season they haven't been able to shoot free throws. And, looks like it matters a little bit here. And then all of a sudden you have a massive problem when you go 9 of 18 from the line and you lose by 4. I mean, you hit 4 more of those. That's not too hard to ask. What, that goes 13 of 18?
Which
that's
is still
bad.
Mid-percentage
anyway. That's still bad, and you tie it.
60% range.
Yeah, 14 of 18, then you're like, okay, that's a fine percentage, and they win the game. So, I mean, it's just so frustrating. It feels like such a letdown because the first time ever, everything felt complete, and then they just fell apart at the line.
And I think you saw it on Adrian Autry's face at the end of the game when Jaquan Carlos missed the free throw after SU got lucky. They got a turnover. They were fouled. They were down by 3. They had 2 free throws to make it a 1-point game and to potentially play the foul game after that. And what does Jaquan Carlos do? He misses the first one. If you're going to make any of them, make the first one. And then misses it. And the game was pretty much over after that. You got to. It's one thing to not make free throws too in throughout the game, but in crunch time, if you make them, then it kind of solves it. But the free throw line was just atrocious today, and it's something. How are you not practicing that? And it's easier said than done. But
I feel like they are. And with Carlos too, I don't know what it is with Carlos because he's missed a couple free throws this year. He shot 90% from the free throw line last year. That is like, if you shoot 90% from the line in college, you're either like a GPA player at the end of the bench who, boy, that guy can hit his free throws, or you're a superstar. So the fact that Jaquan Carlos did that last year, free throws are the same everywhere. It doesn't matter that he transferred to Hofstra in that category. Yeah. You can say what you want about his defense or his passing transitioning, but the free throw line is the same distance everywhere. But yet this year, he can't hit free throws, and it's the rest of the team. And so, a lot of people want to heap blame on Adrian Autry for some of this stuff. But when it comes to free throws, he can have him shoot 100 free throws a day in the gym. Maybe that's what they're doing. We don't know. But, where do you go if you can't hit free throws?
You can't go anywhere. That's the simplest thing you can do on a basketball court. And it wasn't just one person. I mean, Chris Bell, 3 of 5, missed essentially 2. Jaquan Carlos, the 1 of 2. Eddie Lampkin, 2 of 4. Jair Davis, who's normally, an 80%-ish free throw shooter, 3 of 6. And then Naheem McLeod missed 1 in the first half as well. That's the most basic thing you can do in basketball. When the other team fouls you, you got to make your foul shots, and especially in a game where you spot them 9 points at the beginning. You're down 9-0. You're down 11 at halftime. To come all the way back and to not make your free throws is more of a gut punch than just losing in a blowout fashion, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you just shoot yourself in the foot. That's what it is. You do everything right. You make the little details right. And if you can't hit your free throws, Brent X, free throws matter. We hear this all the time. And then, there was so much focus on other things through the first 3 games of the season that free throws almost fell by the wayside. People didn't realize that they were not in the top 300. There's 355 teams in Division I. Syracuse men's basketball was not in the top 300 in free throw shooting coming into today. That'll go even lower after today. And it really makes you wonder, well, you're focused on so many other things. If you can't hit the free throws, you're not going to win the game.
Free throws are like penalties in football. There are things you have to have buttoned up, especially as you get through the season. It's something that you just need to have buttoned up generally to start the season. You can't be shooting yourself in the foot the entire game, especially in these close games Syracuse has been in. You got to be able to make free throws. That's part of the reason why the games have been close through the first 3 games, and why Texas today they lost to in the Barclays Center. 70-66, SU loses down in Brooklyn. Hudson Ridley alongside Jordan Leonard here breaking it all down until 11 p.m. on the double overtime. Call in 315-443-2011. You can check us out on YouTube and Twitter at WAER Sports Talk. And I will say, putting the free throws aside now, there's only so many times you can harp on the free throws throughout an entire show. SU did show great effort in terms of coming back in the second half. I thought they were down for the dead, down by 11 in the first half. They didn't look great. Their defense was atrocious, which we'll talk more in depth a little bit later. But they really did show a lot of heart in that second half, coming all the way back to tie the game and take the lead at points.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised. I feel like this is a team that plays close games, and I would give some of the credit to Syracuse. I would also give some of the credit to Texas, which we'll get to later. I don't think Texas was particularly good at all. They haven't shown anything at all this year of being good. But I think on Syracuse's end of things, right, this is what we've seen a couple times through these games, right? It was close game against Colgate. They had to make a run to come back. They did. Youngstown State, they were down. They had to make a run to come back. They did. Lemoyne, they were down. They had to make a run to come back, and they did. And now you scale that up to Texas. The only good thing that you can see from that is, okay, they're down. They have to make a run and come back. Last year's team would have curled up into a ball and died. That's just what they did every single time. They took a gut punch, and they and then they fell over. This team actually rose a little bit from the ashes, and you have to credit them for that. Could they finish down the stretch? Maybe not, but they did a lot better of a job than, honestly, hand up, than I thought they would. They really did.
It is still concerning, though, that they have to come back or try to extend a lead against a mid-major every single game in and out. They haven't been able to really play a full half of basketball, let alone a full 40 minutes of basketball. We're not even talking about that. I mean, you look at it, they really started to come back at the end of the first half, so they finally kind of turned it on in that first half. And I will give Adrian Autry credit. The adjustments at halftime were really good. The man defense they switched back to in that second half was really good. The offense started to kind of turn it on. But I think that's something we've seen throughout the entire season so far, too, is that they don't have this alpha on offense. I mean, J.J. Starling scored a crap ton of points against Youngstown State, partially because it went to double overtime. Eddie Lampkin's going to score every game, but there's not that guy where you can give the ball to and expect to score no matter what the defense is doing.
Well, it's 2 things, though. It's they don't have an alpha, but part of the reason they don't have an alpha is what's their identity?
Yeah.
What's their identity? Do you have an answer for that? I don't have an answer.
I don't. And they're not running that many plays, it looks like, on offense. I know that the free-flowing offense is good, but you gotta, if you don't have that alpha like a Judah Mintz who's gonna create for somebody else, J.J. Starling can do that, but you gotta have more drawn out plays, a philosophy, than just kind of that free-flowing offense that it looks like on the court.
Well, we thought that was gonna be Carlos. I mean, it's clearly
not. In the exhibition, it looked like it was gonna be Carlos.
Yeah, against Slippery Rock and Clarion, which I say those degradingly, but I mean, through the first 3 games, who knows? Slippery Rock and Clarion could have kept it even closer with the Syracuse team that came out there for those 3 games. This Syracuse team that we saw today was better. It was, but you're right, it lacks that alpha. And so I think when you have Starling doing it for 1 game against Youngstown State, you have Chris Bell kind of doing it against Lemoyne, even though Jair Davis was the guy in terms of stats. It's just, it's confusing because where do you go? And there's only so much of that you can put on Autry, right? That means you need more plays, though, conversely. So I have seen more plays than we did in last year of Boeheim and first year of Autry. Like, there are more plays because you need that. You don't have Judah where it's like, okay, put it in his hands. Let him go do whatever he needs to do. Yeah, one-on-one ISO. Here's a step back. Oh, I didn't hit it, but he got fouled. And that's your offense. Like, that's your identity. Now you don't have that, sure. If you run more plays, that works. But I think the one solace that I can take out of this is even if they don't have fully an offensive identity, the offense does run through Eddie Lampkin, and you can say that pretty confidently.
Yeah, Eddie Lampkin's been he's not only just the guy who can back you down and score in the paint. He's assisting. He had 6 assists on the day. They run the offense generally through him, which I think is
best
what
passer
they need
on this
to do.
team because
easily the best passer on this team. And we're getting a couple tweets coming in from the post-game presser from Coach Adrian Austri after the loss. He said there's no consolation prizes. We had a chance to win the game and we didn't. That's on us. That's on me. I don't know if that's on him with the free throw misses that were down the stretch. There's only so much you can coach and draw up plays and put your team in a position to win when they're not hitting free throws. And something else he said, rebounding the basketball late in the game, that was big. That was the game. 2 putbacks and free throws cost us. And I think the putbacks too. Chris Bell
that was miserable.
Watching the guy get an offensive rebound and a putback on a crucial possession where if they get the rebound, they have a chance to take the lead and also take control of the game down the stretch. When you give away those opportunities, give up offensive rebounds, and it's not like Syracuse was bad in terms of the rebounding department. They lost in total rebounds by 5. They tied in offensive rebounds, but it's those down the stretch plays where you have to get a body on a body, especially if you're Chris Bell. He had a couple good blocks, but you got to put a body on body in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, that's not one where, Chendall Weaver is the guy who had the offensive board and the putback on that play. That was one where it's not like, okay, Chendall Weaver skies for the board over the head of Bell, who maybe didn't jump as high as he should or commit as hard as he should. No, that took a bounce that had a pretty sharp downturn, and it was almost a basket catch from Weaver. Like, that ball went down quick, and Chris Bell, arms at his side, eyes looking at the basket. I mean, there's a lot of other people doing that in the arena, except they're called fans, and they're not actually playing. So Chris Bell, having that happen to him was kind of like okay, well, that was the major swing at the end of the game, which really put Texas in control. And, if you were watching the TV broadcast, which I hope you weren't, I hope you were listening to 88.3, but if you're watching the TV broadcast,
TV and the radio at the same time,
try to sync them up. That's a good idea. You know what? That doesn't hurt our ratings. I would like you to do that. But I will say, if you saw that broadcast, Adrian Autry was screaming, and you heard Andrew Selver and Ian Nicholas on the call say he was irate walking back to the bench, stalking, I think they said, Chris Bell after that. So he did really care about that at the end of the game, and that made the difference. There's not a whole lot Autry could really do down the stretch, like we said.
Yeah, I think that was a big thing for Chris Bell last year, too. Last year was more defense than anything else. Under Boeheim in the first year was rebounding because Chris Bell did not rebound in the zone whatsoever. Last year with Autry, it was just more rebounding. He can hit threes all he wants. He's a great offensive player. He can hit threes. He can have a mid-range to an extent. But if you're not going to rebound, it's tough to put you on the court, and especially down the stretch like that when those rebounds mean more. I mean, you described it perfectly. The replay is damning for Chris Bell. He's not going to like watching that one in film tomorrow because he just let the guy literally walk around him to go get the offensive board. Didn't even look back for anyone. Didn't do anything of that nature. One of the plays that led to a 70-66 Texas win down in the Barclays Center. Syracuse falls for the first time this season. You're listening to the Double Overtime here on WAER. I'm Jordan Leonard alongside Hudson Ridley. We got you all the way up until 11 p.m. here on WAER. If you want to get in on the action, call in 315-443-2011. You can text us 315-556-3929. Check out our YouTube at WAER Sports Talk. And really, we've seen it actually more than we probably expected through the first couple games, closing lineups because of how close these games have been in terms of the double overtime game against Youngstown, Lemoyne, Colgate, you can name them. I was kind of surprised that Lucas Taylor was in the lineup down the stretch. I know you want to play defense and you want to get stops, and Lucas Taylor had been playing well on defense in that second half, but you got to score the basketball when you're down in terms of, and it was a hard game where you can kind of sub in, sub out in terms of the flow of it. But it was an interesting final lineup, I think, from Adrian Autry, and he's gotten a chance to look at it through the first couple games. So this is maybe an adjustment that he's making because Lucas Taylor hasn't been in late game situations. But you gotta play some offense too.
The idea of Lucas Taylor is nice. Like the idea.
What do you mean by
there.
the idea?
The idea of him is he is
he can score.
Well, he's a 3-and-D wing is the idea.
3-and-D.
Well, exactly.
He took one shot.
Exactly. The idea of Lucas Taylor. That's what they brought him in from Georgia State to do. He shot over 35% from 3 last season. Pretty good clips. Played very good defense at Georgia State. But again, it's the same problem you're seeing with Jaquan Carlos. Actually, no. The opponents haven't scaled up. So I really don't know
Carlos
what this
is a completely different type of player, too.
Well, I was just about to say, the opponents have scaled up,
Yeah.
and then I went, wait a second. No, they haven't. So the idea of Lucas Taylor is nice. In theory, he's supposed to be that 3-and-D wing, the secondary 3-and-D wing behind Chris Bell, which one of them is good at 3 and not D, and the other one is not good at 3 or D.
Which is funny because Chris Bell is good at flashy defense. Those couple blocks, those were great. Those were chase downs,
the chase down blocks. Like, he is good at fun defensive plays. Transition, when the guy is in front of him and he's backpedaling, not so much. But when he's the guy backtracking, he's fun. Lucas Taylor, on the other hand, you never really see a whole lot of him on defense. He called that timeout at the end of the game. That was a bit of a sneaky one. That would have instantly iced the game because Syracuse was out of timeouts. I mean, a Fab 4 situation with Michigan. You don't want to run out of timeouts. So I think, like I said, the idea of Lucas Taylor is nice, but what he actually brings to the table is a lot different than that. The one thing I was surprised about, you mentioned, was I surprised about the lineup? Jaquan Carlos being out there at the very end, I just did not like.
Well, so, it's interesting that you mentioned that. What happened was they wanted him to pass the ball in on the out of bounds that they ended up being a turnover where Chris Bell doesn't go all the way into the far side corner where Jaquan Carlos, the only way he could pass it cross court from the baseline is to that corner. Chris Bell doesn't go there. It's a turnover. Autry said that he didn't really have a great look on it in the postgame in terms of that inbound turnovers, but he said we had too many turnovers at the wrong time, which he's absolutely correct. They didn't have that many turnovers in general, but down the stretch in both halves, they had turnovers that really kind of changed the momentum. That's why they put Carlos in. And theoretically, he's supposed to be a pretty solid free throw shooter.
I mean, both of the things that you saw at Hofstra. I mean, he had a 19-assist game last year against Northeastern, so the theory is, he can pass. He hasn't fully shown that through these first 4 games. We don't really know if he can actually do that with this Syracuse team. Can he shoot free throws? We don't really know that. So the fact that he was out there on the court when the most glaring thing, the only thing we really actually know about Jaquan Carlos is the fact that he really cannot defend that well behind the 3-point line. He's just a little bit undersized. Guys get by him pretty quickly. That's the only thing we really do know. So the fact that he was in late game, yes, I understand as a passer off the inbound. I also don't like the fact that they tried to go straight to the corner. They didn't have the look, and Carlos pulled the trigger anyway instead of bailing out on that.
I agree with that. And also, to add on to that, Jaquan Carlos was cold.
Yeah.
He had not played for a big stretch in the second half. To put him back in the game cold like that, probably not the best decision in terms of the lineups down the stretch. We talked about Lucas Taylor, Jaquan Carlos as well. And I think in terms of Jaquan Carlos, just looking at kind of his season so far, if you want to include the exhibitions, and obviously the talent in the exhibitions, not even comparable to what Texas has. But in the exhibitions, when he was doing well, he was able to drive down the lane. That's where a lot of his passes came from in terms of the assists against Slippery Rock and Clarion, is he drove down the lane, was able to kick out or find a dunker spot. He has not been able to drive or get past guys at the Division I level in the first 4 games consistently at all. That's where
he can't go through the trees. Like, that's the problem. He can't go through the trees. And, if you can't go through the trees against Lemoyne or Colgate, or Youngstown State, even though one of those trees was 7'3",
he goes against Naheem McLeod.
I was going to say, I want to know what it's like in practice. Like, he's going against these bigger guys in practice. Is he doing that in practice? Is he driving the lane and kicking out in practice? Is it a thing where in the game he's like, I can't go into the paint. Those guys are big in there. I'm not going to do that. That doesn't seem like the kind of player he is, or at least was in the last couple of years. So I don't really know what's going on with him right now, if I'm going to be completely honest. Now, the sample size is really small. 4 regular season games, 2 exhibitions. Sure, give him a little more time to figure it out, but the early returns have not been satisfactory to what we at least thought leading up to the season when Syracuse added him in the transfer portal, and then even through those 2 exhibition games where you went, okay, yeah, this could be the guy. He had me fooled, at least through those 2 exhibitions, if that really isn't his game, being like, okay, this guy is the ultimate distributor that Syracuse was missing last year. I just don't think he and Lucas Taylor fit in that end-of-the-game lineup for different reasons.
I think both of them got way too much preseason hype without knowing whether it was going to translate to the Power 5 or 6 level, whatever you want to call it now, without the Pac-12 at the basketball, college basketball that is. Syracuse falls 70-66 down at the Barclays Center in day one of the Empire Classic. We're going all the way up until 11 p.m. here on WAER. You can call in 315-443-2011 when we fit our first break here. But after our break, we're going over the defense. First half, a lot of zone. Second half, man-to-man. It was both back-and-forth defense. We're going to break it all down after this.
At Marketplace, we help you understand what's going on in the economy and why. There is no topic too large or too small, whether it's the housing market, jobs, interest rates, even the prices we are paying at the grocery store. Our independent journalism is critical in helping you connect the dots and getting the context that you need. So, join me, Kai Risdall, every weekday on Marketplace.
Weeknights at 6 on 88.3 WAER.
Delve into the rich tapestry of acoustic-led folk, roots, and Americana music as we welcome back Common Threads here on 88.3 FM WAER. Enjoy national and international acts as well as local artists every Sunday with host Pete Thomas. Whether you're seeking the comfort of timeless classics or contemporary gems and music discovery, don't miss Common Threads Sundays from 2 to 5 exclusively on 88.3 WAER, your local NPR station.
Hi, this is Tracy, Director of Membership and Development. You know, one of the things you can count on from WAER, we've got your back when it comes to reporting the news. And one of the things this station counts on to keep it all going, contributions. One way to help, donating a vehicle you no longer need. It's free to you, easy to do, and it could mean hundreds of dollars in support and hundreds of dollars in tax deductions. If you don't need it, donate it. Visit WAER.org to learn more. Thanks.
Gospel from 6 to 8 a.m. right here on WAER. Hosted by Cora Thomas, the program features some of the best local and national gospel artists. You'll hear everyone from Daryl Coley to the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir to the Winans family. More information is available online at WAER.org. Join us Sunday mornings from 6 to 8 a.m. for Sunday Morning Gospel on 88.3 FM WAER.
We know you've got a lot to do in a day, and sometimes it may not be easy to tune in at exactly the right time to catch WAER News. But WAER News is always available, wherever and whenever you are, without a paywall. Visit our website to use our live stream or catch up on local and national news, as well as podcasts on our website at WAER.org.
Gives it off Kaluma one-on-one, flips it on the reverse, got it to go. Timeout, Adrian Autry. A disastrous start for the Orange in Brooklyn.
Syracuse fans trying not to look back in anger after that one. Syracuse falling to Texas 70-66, the first game of the Legends Classic down in Barclays Center. Hudson Ridley here with you, alongside Jordan Leonard. Now, we got into a good bit of what Syracuse kind of did to flip the script a little bit more, but the changes in defense really kind of made a big difference down the stretch. If you noticed a lot of that, the X's and O's, please call in, let us know. 315-443-2011, or you can text us, 315-556-3929. But Jordan, early in the game, a 9-0 run from Texas, everything was going haywire, alarm bells sounding. So Adrian Autry decides, okay, I'm pulling a page out of Jim Boeheim's book. We're going back to the zone. And then, it helped, but not really. It was just kind of, it didn't stop the bleeding in any way.
I liked the fact that he switched it up.
Yeah, I like that he tried.
They were down 9-0 and really being taken to the woodshed early. But the zone, and you could switch to it from time to time, but you can't play a zone consistently in college basketball in the modern game because teams can just shoot. I mean, Texas still didn't even shoot it that great on the day from 3, 4, 15. But when they switched to zone, they were hitting their threes. They were 3 of 9, 33%, which, is all right as a team. Nothing too bad, nothing too crazy. but you just give way too many open shots, especially when you look at the roster. We were talking about the lineups. You mentioned Jake Juan Carlos. He's like a Joe Girard. He's on the smaller side.
Yeah.
You can't play a zone with smaller guards at the top because you're trying to get your hands in passing lanes, hands in faces, and when they're on the smaller side, it just doesn't happen like that. So I appreciate the attempt, and I think they can switch to it off and on here and there for a possession or two just to switch it up. But you can't be running zone for an extended period of time in games.
That's one where if they still had Quadir Copeland, like they could run zone because
they could
he's
run
got the long
Quadir
arms.
at the top with JJ at the top, but unfortunately Quadir decided to transfer to McNeese State.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think you're right. It changed the dynamic a little bit because it was like, okay, at least Syracuse is trying something new. That was the big difference. Syracuse is trying something new. They did struggle to close out in the zone because, of course, that's the most difficult part. If you get passed around in that zone, and a team like Texas will pass around that zone well enough, then you start to have the breakdowns. You start to have the holes. It wasn't just the three-point shooting, too, though. They also struggled, on the low block. There was one play where Texas was cutting through the lane. I think it was Kaluma who was on the low block. Eddie Lampkin was playing way high up in the paint, not looking behind him. Well, you know who else wasn't? Jair Davis at the same time. Well, you only have two bigs on the court, and none of them are looking at Kaluma behind them. It was a pretty easy slam for Kaluma behind them. So, I think that's mostly because they're not focused on playing zone, and this is a Syracuse team that, at this point in Syracuse history, they're probably really looking to get away from the zone. Because of how it ended, and you want to kind of be, Autry wants to be his own man.
New era.
Yeah, a new era. They're playing man-to-man now. So I doubt they practiced that too much.
Yeah, no.
It didn't really help, but it did change things.
When the zone is not your primary defense, you're not going to be amazing at it in terms of the rotations and knowing kind of when to go up, especially the type of zone that Syracuse tends to run where it's a 2-3 zone, but the guys on the wings are going really high up to kind of prevent that middle, not the corner, not the top, but the wing three.
Yeah.
And then the problem is when you do that, your center has to kind of be athletic. So, like, if Malik Brown was there, that would maybe work a little bit. But with Eddie Lampkin or Naheem McLeod, who aren't as athletic to get from block to block and even extend that out a little bit, it just puts too much pressure on your defense. And the whole reason they were doing it is because the man-to-man was just getting eaten up alive. And I think it all stems from just staying in front of your guy.
Yeah.
And I think they did that in the second half, and that's partially why they played better. If you prevent the driving lanes, you make them work a lot harder for baskets, make them make tough shots over you. And again, easier said than done, but preventing driving lanes, cutting off their angles, that's what you have to do on defense on a man-to-man basis. They did a lot better in the second half than in the first.
It finally felt like Syracuse in that second half when they started playing that aggressive man-to-man, it really clicked and they figured it out. For the first time this year, it felt like they were playing defense. If you thought the same thing, you can call in and let us know. 315-443-2011. Jordan Leonard and Hudson Ridley here on the Double Overtime, taking you up until 11 p.m., so we still have plenty to talk about. But that second half, once it clicked in, that was the first time that it felt like, okay, they're keeping their man in front of them. They're playing aggressive. They're not overcommitting on anything. No one's really fully lost unless they got into transition, which that was still a little bit of a struggle. But overall, it started to click.
They finally locked in. The intensity finally went up. They decided to play defense. It's one thing to be, up in a game or playing against, a lower opponent and think that or know that you're more athletic than them and play defense. When you finally play a team that, you're expected to lose against objectively, you decide to play harder in the second half, especially when you're down. And Adrian Autry said at postgame, and you can check out tweets from postgame on W8ER Sports Talk on X, Sports on X, excuse me. We'll also talk to Tyler Aitken and what he saw in the Barclays Center in a little bit. They finally locked in on defense. The intensity was there, and that's what I think this team needs to do going forward too. They're going to score points. They have enough offensive players on the court. They have J.J. Starling, Chris Bell, Eddie Lampkin. They have multiple ways to score. If you focus on defense and parlay that into transition and just putting pressure on the other team, that's how you win in college basketball. You have to lock in on the defensive side, especially with the roster that Syracuse has.
It was almost like the meme of the guy in the chair, the gamer chair, who goes, okay, second half, and he sits up, and he gets ready to go. That's what it reminded me of.
Well, with how many Syracuse fans were in attendance, they better sit up and play a game.
Exactly. Exactly. That they had to be on high alert to make sure, okay, we're not going
Melo
to
was
get embarrassed.
courtside. Cayenne was courtside.
Yeah, you had to worry at some point in that early Texas run. Cayenne Anthony is courtside. Let's make sure we don't lose too bad if you're Syracuse. You can't make sure, that happens. But I think the one biggest issue with what you said is, how do they do that with a team constructed the way they are to play 40 minutes of that?
I don't think
Eddie
they
Lampkin
can. I don't think they
can't
can
do that. So what do you do? Where do you
sacrifice?
sacrifice?
You got to play as many minutes of good defense as possible. And I know that sounds bad. It sounds like horrible basketball right there. Just play as many minutes of defense as you can. But it's going to be rotating players. I mean, Eddie Lampkin can't play all 40 minutes.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. Jair Davis, I think, is a better backup 5 than Naheem McLeod. I know Naheem only played 4 minutes. He scored 2 points. Congratulations. 2 fouls, though, as well in 4 minutes. But Jair Davis has to be that backup 5, and you have to use your rotation. Fran Brown does it in football. He uses his rotation of players because they want to play fast. If Syracuse wants to play fast, they have to rotate. J.J. Starling played all 40 minutes, and that's great. But throughout the whole season, he can't play all 40 minutes. You're going to have to use your guys. Peter Majstorovic didn't play at all today, and I'm not saying he has to play a ton, but use the guys and keep fresh bodies on the court. That's how I think you also step up the intensity. If they're fresher, they're more likely to play better defense on the other side.
It's almost like Adrian Autry wheels out a whiteboard before the game, and he goes, okay, guys, 27 minutes of really hard defense. That's the number we're shooting for, and hopefully, that climbs game by game. We hope you've enjoyed so far in the double overtime. We're going to take a quick step aside for station identification.
Hi, this is Andrew Catalan, SU class of 2001, and you're listening to 88.3 FM WAER Syracuse, your local NPR station from the Newhouse School at Syracuse University.
And again, you're listening to the double overtime, specifically on Syracuse. Hudson Ridley here alongside Jordan Leonard. We're taking you up until 11. Syracuse getting back in it on the defensive end, switching between a little bit of zone and a little bit of man. If you thought one looked better, call in, let us know. 315-443-2011. The only thing that, Jordan, I can say really looked better was the fast break points. They only let up 8 to Texas. This is a speedy Texas team with a lot of options. Trey Johnson is really fast. Chendall Weaver is really fast. Kaluma is sneaky fast to get up the court. And the combination of that, you would think what you've seen in previous games, especially those 22 fast break points against Cornell, this team is really going to struggle in transition. But it was a miracle. It was an early Christmas miracle. They really locked down in transition.
Some would say also an early Hanukkah miracle.
That is true. An early Kwanzaa miracle.
We got
perhaps?
all the holidays. The miracles of the holidays, of course. Thanksgiving's a holiday.
That is true. It's my favorite holiday.
Is that your favorite holiday?
Because the football is on, there is food, there are leftovers after, and you get to eat so much. And shout out, if I had to do the dishes, it would not be my favorite holiday. But the fact that I only have to clean off the table, then makes it my favorite.
Well, Syracuse was cleaning out the fast break points from Texas, like you were
That is
mentioning.
true.
I think that was the biggest emphasis, and it's great to see from Syracuse because they were struggling in the first couple games. You make the adjustment in the second half, really. I mean, and also, I think also what contributed to it, 50% shooting in the second half. When you make baskets, kind of hard to go in transition if you're Texas, so that always helps. But I think just getting back and, again, forcing them to really play offense in the half court. That's what Syracuse has lacked in the first couple of games. That's why Colgate, Lemoyne, Youngstown State has had success on offense against an unset Syracuse defense. And maybe that's the key. If they limit fast break points, they can be better on defense because, I mean, there really wasn't much. They couldn't go farther down. They were the worst defense in the Power 6, Power 5, whatever you want to call it in basketball. Coming into the game, they were in the low 100s if you go into KenPom's defensive efficiency. Now they're up to 126 or so.
Ooh.
So there was no really way to go down, and I think in that second half you saw it by limiting the fast break points. They were able to force them into tough shots.
I think the biggest difference was Eddie Lampkin, and here's
in the
why.
defense?
On the fast break defense, because it really was not like Lampkin played out of his mind on fast break defense.
Yeah.
It was going from 0 to okay, not 0 to hero. But the fact that he was even okay when he was getting down low, he wasn't turning the ball over as much. He had 3 on the day, but overall he wasn't turning the ball over as much or in as many precarious situations. When he was getting down low, he was finishing his shots, and when he wasn't getting down low, he was orchestrating from the top of the key. If something goes wrong, if a shot misses on a 3-point look,
they would usually have him at the top of the key so that when that shot misses, when that rebound is had, Eddie Lampkin is already hauling his butt down to the other end of the court and getting in the paint, because in those games, the first 3 of the year, his biggest problem was, okay, the shot misses or maybe it's a three-point attempt. He's in the paint when that three-point attempt goes up. Well, oh boy, Eddie Lampkin has got to run 94 feet, and that is a consistent problem at high speeds for Eddie Lampkin. So what they figured out how to do is, okay, Eddie Lampkin is the guy who gets back the first, he gets in the paint, and he was pretty consistent at finding his man. And that really changed it, especially when, like you mentioned in that second half, they locked in on offense, they locked in on defense, they were more consistent in transition, and they only had 2 transition points, rather fast break points, allowed in that second half.
Do you think also some of the defense getting better, especially in that second half, was playing less of Jaquan Carlos? Because I know he's more of an offensive guy than defense. He's not a defensive prowess per se, but the height disadvantage has been really kind of an indictment on him the first couple games throughout the season. You think it was because they played a little bit less?
I want to like Jaquan Carlos. I do, but I do think that helped. I even said it later down the stretch of the game. I went, wow, Jaquan Carlos really has not played much, and oh boy, the defense is looking pretty good. It's tough because when you look at the identity of this team and you go, okay, I want to play basketball that has a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5. A point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, and center, and they all do their role. Well, in modern college basketball, and especially with this team, you really can't do it. If you take him out, you still have the distributor in your center in Lampkin, and then J.J. Starling can guard the 1 because he does that pretty well. And then all of a sudden, there's no role for Jaquan Carlos because his only thing was to be a defender and a distributor, and if he cannot be suitable on the court for either of those, I mean, you don't want to see him fade into a Kyle Cuff role because he transferred all the way here for that to play meaningful minutes and maybe be a starter. But when you look down the stretch and you go, man, I don't think that he fits into this lineup in any way that's like super beneficial as of right now. It's still very early. He can turn it around. I just don't see where he fits, and I think the defense just looked a lot better without him.
I also think it looked better without Donnie Freeman. I mean, he's a 5-star. He's going to play offense. He's going to score. He had some points today. He had 9 points. He only had 2 boards. Only took 6 shots total. But he struggles to play defense, especially when you're putting him at the 4. He struggles to play defense against legit 4 players in college basketball. I mean, I think the best front court right now on a consistent basis, especially down the stretch, is Eddie Lampkin and Jair Davis, because Jair Davis brings the beef down low along with Eddie Lampkin. He can really face up, and he's athletic enough to guard athletic 4s too. So it's not just both. He can guard both kind of positions, and I think, down the stretch, you got to weigh defense, offense, especially with the way this game was going. They needed to play a lot more defense in the second half to come back from down 11. That's why Jair Davis was playing a lot more, because I think Autry knows if they need stops, they got to put Jair in over Donnie.
I think it would be beneficial for everybody, both Lampkin and the team. Or not Lampkin, rather Freeman and the team, if they started playing Freeman at the 3. If they had that lineup, like I mentioned, of Lampkin being the distributor at the 5, kind of that point center, Starling guarding the 1.
Every single time with Eddie Lampkin.
Starling at the 1, Bell at the 2. That becomes your backcourt, and then the 3 becomes Freeman because he cannot guard down low. You saw it in the Youngstown State game especially. Every time they were taking it to the basket with a guy who was like 6'5", 6'6", and going up against Donnie Freeman, who's supposed to be an NBA first-round draft pick. The thing that then benefits Freeman is, okay, his shoddy defense in the paint because he's a little bit of a thinner guy. He's still got time to put on muscle, but that doesn't get on tape. And then all of a sudden, he becomes a guy that, okay, he's not a defensive liability. Based on his height, he'll probably play the 3. His height, his shooting, he's kind of like almost he's not Kevin Durant.
No.
Don't get me wrong, he's not Kevin Durant, but he's got the Kevin Durant build a little bit.
Nice comparison when they just played Texas, too.
Exactly, yes. I'm hoping no Longhorns fans are listening going, whoa, he's not Kevin Durant. If you want to call in and tell me I'm stupid for that, go ahead, 315-443-2011. But at the same time, if they put him at the 3, then his game opens up a lot more. He can create his own shot a lot more. He doesn't have to worry about the low block and getting bullied, and then his stock will go up. So I think it's beneficial for everybody if they just start playing him at the 3, and that does mean bye-bye Jaquan Carlos.
That's a lineup I think we need to see a lot more. Is J.J. Starling at the 1, Bell at the 2, Donnie at the 3, Jair at the 4, and Eddie Lampkin at the 5. I think
could not agree more.
Defense, offense, you factor everything in, that is definitely your best lineup on the floor. It doesn't have to start the game per se, but that is your best lineup on the floor, especially when you need to come back and especially down the stretch when you need to play defense and score at the same time.
It's especially beneficial because your two guys that can guard guards really have proven to be J.J. Starling and Chris Bell. I think you would say it's blasphemous last year if you're like, oh, Chris Bell is guarding a guard. But no, he does a pretty good job of that now.
He's long enough.
He's long enough. He's got good speed. I mean, he is racking up blocks now. Chris Bell had 2 blocks
The
last
flashy
game.
defense,
yeah,
baby.
He had a block tonight. He almost had a second chase down block, which would have been an absurd angle to hit that. But I think overall, if you have that as your backcourt, you have the shooting, the distributing goes in your center and Lampkin. So it becomes kind of an interesting dynamic, but that is kind of modern college basketball where you have that point center, and the team will look a lot better. Just an update quickly on Syracuse right now and who they could play tomorrow in that 7 p.m. spot. Again, they play the loser of Texas Tech and St. Joe's. Right now, St. Joe's up 26-20, 8 minutes left in the first half. So it's still, a game that is well within the balance, but either of those teams would be interesting to have Syracuse play at this point. I think the defense and the step forward it took really kind of it reinvigorated maybe some of this fan base a little in that second half to become a team where it's like maybe it's close games. And that fan base was very, very loud inside the Barclays Center. We will have Tyler Aiken, our reporter, on the other side of this quick break. He was in the Barclays Center with everything you'll need to know about what happened in Brooklyn tonight.
Hello, I'm Larry Bousquet.
And I'm David Holstein, and we are 2 of the managing members of the Bousquet-Holstein law firm.
We're proud to support WAER because for both Bousquet-Holstein and WAER, giving back to the community is an integral part of who we are.
Just like WAER provides reliable news and entertainment for its listeners each day, our attorneys work to provide quality legal service to clients and support a variety of organizations that strengthen the fabric of our community.
Listening to the wings of a monarch butterfly. What a magical thought.
They arrive here on the Day of the Dead, which we celebrate here in Mexico, and a lot of the indigenous people believe that it's the souls of their ancestors that are returning, and it's very spiritual.
That's On Point with me, Meghna Chakrabarty.
From 7 to 8 on WAER, your local NPR station from the Newhouse School at Syracuse University.
Hi, this is Steve Inskeep with NPR News. Any good news organization should bring you points of view that you agree with, and points of view that you don't. Facts you approve, and facts that make you uncomfortable. Our job is to bring you the full picture in context so you can decide. This is NPR.
Listen to WAER News every weekday during Morning Edition from 5 to 9 and All Things Considered from 4 to 6, or catch up anytime at WAER.org.
On last week's Wait, Wait, we asked Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer if she was the only sitting governor to have a rap song written about her.
That wouldn't surprise me if you met them. I'm going to get in trouble now.
On Peter Sagal, we'll try to get the stars of Somebody Somewhere, Bridget Everett and Jeff Hiller, to get themselves in hot water. That's on our intentionally provocative news quiz from NPR.
Saturday morning at 11 on 88.3 FM WAER.
Hi, this is Tracy, Director of Membership and Development. Why not give a gift to WAER and yourself when you let us take your unwanted vehicle off your hands? Not only will your donation help support the on-air programs our community relies on every day, but it may even qualify for a tax deduction. Visit WAER.org to learn more. Thanks.
Bounces to the free throw line, Taylor. Swings it near side, Lampkin. One-on-one. Bodies under the hoop. Flips it on the reverse. No. Put back. Davis rolls in.
Welcome back to the double overtime here on WAER following a Syracuse 70-66 loss to Texas down at the Barclays Center alongside Hudson Ridley. I'm Jordan Leonard. We have Tyler Aiken, our WAER sports talk reporter, joining the show. If you have a question for Tyler, call in 315-443-2011. You can also text us 315-556-3929. Tyler, how we doing down there at the Barclays Center?
You know, we're doing good. It feels like the JMA Wireless Dome South edition. I mean, it was pretty much all Syracuse fans today, so that was pretty great. But, yeah, I mean, St. Joe's is rolling Texas Tech right now, so maybe a game against the Red Raiders for the Orange tomorrow.
Potentially. You mentioned the crowd and how they were rolling. I saw one of your tweets earlier in the game that the crowd was louder than the Dome in any of the first 3 games. How loud on a scale of 1 to 10 do you think it got?
I'd say it maybe got up to an 8 when Eddie Lampkin went on a nice 7-0 stretch all on his own right in the core of the second half. That's when the crowd was cheering, Eddie, Eddie. I thought they could have gone with an Eddie MVP or something, but
okay.
I don't know if they've got that much rhythm.
That's too dynamic.
Do you think the too small that Eddie Lampkin always gives whenever he makes a post up fired up the crowd at all? Eddie Lampkin, man.
I mean, he's 265, so yeah, I'd say so.
265. Also, Carmelo Anthony sitting courtside. Did you?
So a little bit of extra information. Saw them afterwards on our walk to the locker room to talk to players.
Did you say hi?
Carmelo Anthony drives a Cybertruck. He had kind riding shotgun ready to pull out of the parking lot there. So that was interesting.
Did you say hi?
I did not say hi. He was talking to Mike Waters, someone who covered him 20 years ago. So fair enough.
That's fair. That's fair. I hear you disagree with something that we said in the last segment, Tyler. That the defense rotations. What do you disagree with?
We got thing one over here saying
thing one.
Yeah, you're thing one.
I'm
you're
thing one. Okay.
So we got thing one over here saying.
Wait, why am I thing two?
we'll get to thing two. So somehow So somehow Donnie Freeman is too big to play the 4?
No. Not too big, too small. He's
he's
skinny.
so light.
He's too skinny.
You both agree he's too small to play the 4 in college basketball.
He's too light to play the 4 in college basketball.
We're not talking
against
about
older
height-wise.
players.
So you guys are just simply wrong because Marek Dolezaj is lighter than him and played
Marek
center in the
Dolezaj is a
ACC.
completely different player, Tyler.
He had heart.
You can't compare Donnie Freeman.
Did you just say he has heart?
Marek Dolezaj had a lot. He chipped his tooth.
Yes, dude, he is my favorite Syracuse athlete of all time of any sport. But you cannot
You can't be comparing Marek Dolezaj to Donnie
I'm just
Freeman.
saying, for you to say Donnie Freeman needs to line up as the 3 is absolutely ridiculous.
No, it's not.
No, it's
not at all. First of all, completely different defenses.
Yes.
We're talking man versus zone.
No. Donnie played the center in the zone today. Just want to put that out there.
Okay, do they
And
run
the
zone mostly?
And the zone didn't work.
Yeah.
What
do you mean? What do you mean?
That's a
I
longer
know.
conversation.
I know. In the last double overtime, you were talking about how they should switch to the zone.
Jordan, let's get into that. I'll eat my words.
Okay.
Syracuse looked better in the man than in the zone today.
Mm-hmm.
But what looked better about the man-to-man was Syracuse played what I like to call a man with zone principles. There was much more off-ball help. There was much more playing off the off-ball defender. It almost looked a little bit like a Virginia pack line defense at times with how far inside the weak side defense was playing.
I was
what
with
was good
you.
about it.
I was
That's what
with
was
you
good
with
about
that man defense with zone principles until you brought the pack line defense in there.
What?
Shades of pack line. That's what you have to give it. There's a differentiator. I agree.
It's not that. It's not the. Sure, shades of it. However you guys want to put it. I mean, you clearly can't take what you guys have to say seriously if you're saying Donnie Freeman should line up as the 3. He's 6'10".
Because you have who cares?
Oh no!
Oh, just because he's 6'10", he has to play the 4. You ever heard of weight? You just talked about Eddie Lampkin being 265. Donnie Freeman looks like he's 190.
Have you watched basketball in the last 5 years? That literally it does not matter what
Kevin
you play
Durant
in there.
plays the 3 at the NBA.
Well, I heard Hudson almost compare those two. I'm glad he didn't.
I made sure there was a differential.
They're not the same player.
So-
He's talking about size and skinniness.
And so where they have to play because of that. That's why he plays the 3.
So explain this to me.
Yeah.
Are there how many like 4s? How many power forwards are you so worried about Donnie Freeman playing against?
Literally Youngstown State's Nico Gillette at 6'6", who took him to the basket so many times.
So
after the game, after the game, I asked Adrian Autry about he was getting driven on a lot by this guy that was 6'6" and just a lot more muscular than him. Like, how can he play down low? And he went, yeah, I mean that was really tough. Exactly. That's the problem on the low block.
I would be more worried about his lack of foot speed against a 3 than I would be about his lack of size or lack of strength against a 4.
Well, you can make up with foot speed with this thing called wingspan.
Which he has a massive.
You can also make up for strength with wingspan.
Not when you get pushed
not when you
4
get
feet
bully
out
ball.
of the way.
Not when you get bully ball.
Okay, so we can agree to disagree on this because at the end of the day, he played 4 minutes in the second half.
Yeah,
So if you guys
because he wasn't playing good defense against the fours because he was put in at the 4 position. You got to put
that's
Jair.
not where he played defensively. You literally are just wrong. This game, he played the 5 defensively most of the time. This game, he objectively played most of his minutes at the 5 defensively. That's just a
You can
fact.
drop objectively all you want. Well,
That's literally a fact.
Let's stick with the defense. What do you think in terms of the man-to-man, especially in the second half? Adrian Autry said it after the game. They locked in that second half. What do they do better in that second half of play compared to the man-to-man they started the game with and were down 9-0?
Again, it's not the on-ball defense was not any better. I think Jaquan Carlos is still an absolute liability when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. But there was then the guys next to him that were playing help defense, and then the far side defenders were stepping up inside the paint a lot better. So that's what was good about Syracuse's defense in the second half. The on-ball defense was the same, if not worse than it's been in the previous weeks. The off-ball defense was so much better. Syracuse was rotating better. I remember when Syracuse ran the zone in the first half, then switched the first play in the man defense after Syracuse ran the zone. It was about the 10-minute mark of the first half. Syracuse had super good rotations. There was a really nice slide by J.J. Starling where he was at the top of the key, slid down to the wing, and he had a really nice late rotation that forced a travel. That's what makes Syracuse's defense good, is that rotation. It's that movement. Like I tried to reference earlier, it's man-to-man defense with zone tendencies, the ability to flex, the ability to slide, the ability to rotate when needed. I really appreciated that today.
Yeah. That defensive improvement in the second half bring the game a little close. 70-66, Texas came out on top. You're listening to the Double Overtime here on WAER alongside Hudson Ridley. I'm Jordan Leonard. We got you all the way up until 11 p.m. We have our WAER Sports Talk reporter Tyler Aiken on the line. If you have a question for him, 315-443-2011, the number to call. And Tyler, Chris Bell, he had an up and down game. He didn't shoot the ball very well, but had a crucial non-rebound late in the game. And the defense also was kind of suspect out of him for most of the game.
He had a down game. He did not have an up and down game. Yeah, 11 points. 33% shooting. I really don't care. He did not earn himself to be on the court late in the game. The only reason he was out there is because he technically, theoretically, can hit a three-point shot. And so when you're down 3 points with 15 seconds left, he needs to be on the court. And I respect that he needs to be on the court, but he was disgustingly awful today on the defensive end.
Yeah.
His attitude was awful.
Tyler,
Every time.
Tyler, who else are you putting on the court other than Chris Bell?
I agree. That's why he needed to be out there. I'm saying he needed to be out there. He didn't deserve to be out there. He was out there solely because out of necessity. That's the word I'm looking for. He was out there for necessity. He was not out there because he earned the minutes, because he disgusted me on the court today.
Wow.
His rebounding was horrendous. Every time out, he would scream at a different coach. He's screaming at Alan Griffin. What are you screaming about? You just complained about a foul instead of getting back on defense. You just didn't box out for a rebound. You just took a stupid three-point shot. You just drove down the lane and lost your dribble over and over and over again. 11 points, it makes it look way too good of a game for Chris Bell.
So, Tyler, I got a question for you.
Yes.
Since Chris Bell played so bad today, do you
Yes.
think Donnie should play the 3 with Jair at the 4 instead of Chris Bell at the 3?
The idea of him playing the 3 disgusts me, but seeing Chris Bell on the court when he doesn't need to be disgusts me even more.
So you do agree with that notion then, potentially?
Sure. I mean, whatever it takes to get Chris Bell off the court, unless he absolutely needs to be in there, which would be in situations where Syracuse needs a 3. That's it.
That's just ridiculous.
What do you mean it's ridiculous?
That's ridiculous.
He's one of their best
Chris
offensive
Bell,
weapons.
he's one of their best players. Best
didn't
players
play-
can have a down game. That happens.
So what is he? Which name one game this year where he's impressed you?
Lemoyne
What did he do against Lemoyne that impressed you?
scored 20 points and shot fairly well.
Yep, because his shooting was good. But if he only has a good shooting game 1 out of every 4 games, then what does he bring to the team?
Last year he shot fine.
When he is not hitting shots, he is a liability.
Yeah, but career, he's a 40% three-point percent shooter in college. Like that is what he is. He has a couple down games, Tyler. But
Yes.
look at this. He started 66 of all 66 games in college, and there's a reason why. Because he's good. He can have down games.
But you need to have a quicker pull to get him on the bench if you find out he's having a down game.
And
Because
replace him with who?
Again,
Someone
I'll go
who's
back
worse?
to Elijah Moore?
Yes,
Lucas
I want to
Taylor?
see. I want to see more from both of them. They played really great defense today.
Kyle Cuff?
Lucas Taylor shot the ball once.
Not Kyle Cuff. I said defense. Hudson, please stop. I said defense. Both of them played better defense than him today, and they didn't put up bad shots. They were both a much higher net positive than he was.
So would you be worried about the team's ability to score? Because Chris Bell, yeah, he might not play well every single game on an offensive side of the ball.
Oh, okay. He might not play well on both sides of the ball every once in a while.
I said the offensive side of the
because
ball.
Because defensively he's awful, and we agree on that. So
he's mid sometimes. He's not great others. I'm not saying he's an elite defender, but let's say he has an off game offensively. You're taking him off the court. Doesn't that impact the offense overall? Chris Bell, because what Hudson said, he's a 40% career three-point shooter. That spaces the floor, Tyler. That creates room for Eddie Lampkin. That creates room for J.J. Starling driving to the tin.
But the defense was not respecting his three today.
I don't know about that. The top report on the scouting report, other than Eddie Lampkin, is Chris Bell can shoot. Take away Chris Bell from three.
Well, in the second half, whenever Chris Bell was on the court, he was not attracting all that much defensive attention. Instead, Eddie Lampkin was being doubled in the paint because he's a phenomenal post scorer, and then he was kicking the ball out because he's a phenomenal passer as well.
And they still did fine. So is this more of Syracuse being good on the defense? I know this is cliche. Is this more of Syracuse being good on the defensive end or Texas being bad because Texas did not impress me on the offensive end?
At the whole game or just the second half? Or
second half specifically.
Okay, I was going to say Texas shot the ball 61% in the first half.
Yeah.
They did switch to the zone a little bit in that second half, or mostly in that second half of the first half.
So I would say in the second half, I was more impressed with Syracuse's defense than I thought Texas was playing poorly. I mean, obviously there was some negative regression, some regression to the mean when it came to the Longhorn shooting, but Syracuse was rotating a lot better. So I would say it was more Syracuse good defense than Texas bad offense, but obviously there's a little bit of both.
Do you agree with all these takes from Tyler Aiken? Call into the show, 315-443-2011. You can text us, 315-556-3929. Check us out on Twitter and YouTube at WAER Sports Talk. Tyler, we got to get to it. The free throws. I mean, absolutely atrocious. Basically, the reason Syracuse lost the game. Did Adrian Autry talk about that at all in the post-game press conference, and what did you see?
So he did address it. Off the top, he said free throws was the reason Syracuse lost this game, and he said it was unacceptable. And then he focused on other stuff. And then he was asked a question by a reporter about, what he's seen this year, because after tonight's performance, Syracuse is under 60% on free throws, and it's been an issue. Syracuse hasn't shot above 66% in a single game all year, so it's been consistent. And he was asked about that, and he was like, you're right, there's no excuses, we need to be better. Didn't really have an answer for that. What I will say is I can't blame him. He said they've been working on it like crazy in practice. It's not really a coaching thing. There's only so much he can do. There's no strategy with free throws. Obviously, he needs to hold his team accountable, but at the end of the day, he cannot put up those free throws, and it's on the players there. So I wish he kind of talked a little bit more about it, but I didn't really know what else there was for him to say.
Yeah, it's almost like, we have this debate a lot with football and the penalties when we talk about Coach Fran
My
Brown.
brain went the same spot.
What can he really do? And it's the same thing with Autry. What can you really do? At a certain point, you are recruiting 4 stars, even 5 stars, guys who, in theory, are hitting free throws and have the ability to hit free throws consistently. And when they don't do that, and that's the reason why you're losing games, you bring in guys in the portal like Jair Davis, who shot 81% from the line last year, Jaquan Carlos, who shot over 90% from the line last year. So you bring in guys who can shoot free throws, and then they just can't. That confuses me. This is going to sound crazy, but I want to say, maybe it's a depth of field thing where,
they
Syracuse,
weren't in the dome, though.
They weren't in the dome, but they were in the Barclays Center, which also is big behind the basket.
No,
that's just a theory. I know it sounds crazy. I'm just tossing it out there. Maybe?
You buying into that, Tia?
You are a college basketball player. You are like a 5-star, 4-star recruit, like you said, Hudson. I do not care about depth of field. You practice for 2 hours shoot-around before the game. Depth of field means nothing.
That's a fair take out of you,
Yeah.
I will say. Syracuse loses 70-66, the final score from the Barclays Center. Tyler Aiken, our WAER Sports Talk reporter, on with us. If you have a question for him, we can ask you. You can ask him on the line. Call in, 315-443-2011. You can also text us the question, 315-556-3929. 3929, and someone that kind of goes by the wayside because he didn't play, but he's been available the last 3 games, Chance Westry. Tyler, do you think that Chance, when he eventually gets back, potentially gets in the game, can help this team kind of in that depth of guard slot? You know, he's 6'6", he's a combo guard, can maybe play some defense, play some point guard. I don't know. Do you think he can help this team?
I mean, he's already had a better season than Jaquan Carlos, so why not? Why not put him on the court?
Well, he hasn't played.
Correct, and he's still had a better season than Jaquan Carlos. I'll give you an interesting update. So my family's at this tournament watching, and parents are staying at the same hotel as Chance Westry's parents. Zeke Westry, Chance's dad, was talking to my parents. He thought today was the day, really thought Chance was going to get in the game, and then that didn't happen. So clearly it's not just this team saying he's available. He's legitimately available and wanting to play and not being put in, so not really sure what to make of that. But he could totally make an impact. He was a highly recruited player. Obviously, we haven't seen much of him at the college level. Didn't play a whole ton at Auburn because of injuries. Hasn't played yet at Syracuse because of injuries. But I totally think he could be another piece for Syracuse's backcourt.
So you're saying there's a chance, perhaps?
Again, he has already had a better season than Jaquan Carlos.
Yeah, well, it's hard to argue when he has no stats, and Jaquan Carlos has played a couple games.
Bad games.
Well, bad games, but, you know, given the chance, we don't know how Chance Westry is going to play,
Which is exactly the point.
Yeah,
it can't be worse.
I know. Yeah, you never know. I guess you never know. A couple more before we let you go, Tyler.
Sure.
The post-game press conference. Any more notable things from the post-game presser?
Listen, I've been a big fan of the tone that Coach Autry has used to talk about the team this year. He was very firm. Like, he was asked right away. The very first question he was asked, hey, you know, I know there's no moral victories, but, you know, you just played 3 pretty bad games against bad teams, and now you played a better game against a good team. You know, what good things do you take from the game? Which was a terrible question. And he answered it by saying it wasn't good enough. It doesn't matter. I think he has said all the right things in press conferences. So I was happy with how he handled it. There wasn't anything earth-shattering that he released. He thought Syracuse made a few really poor plays at the end of the game. He talked about how he initially thought that the pass from Carlos to Bell on the out-of-bounds play with 30 seconds left was deflected. The rest of his coaches told him it wasn't deflected, and then he was like, well, then why the heck did Chris Bell not come to the ball more? So that was his insight there. But other than that, he's just happy with the progress, but clearly hungry for a lot more.
Tyler, we thank you again for taking the time. Hope you enjoy the Barclays Center down there. Syracuse, unfortunately, losing 70-66. We've had another break here on the double overtime. In just a little bit, we do big picture takeaways. How does this compare to Syracuse's first couple games? Don't go away on the double overtime.
On the next Putumayo World Music Hour,
we'll be serenaded by some of the world's finest balladeers. I'm Dan Storper.
And I'm Rosalie Howarth. Pack your bags and join us for World Troubadours, the next Putumayo World Music Hour.
Sunday night at 11 on WAER.
You know a good story when you hear it. Makes you feel, laugh, think. Sometimes you get a little teary. I'm Scott Simon, host of Weekend Edition Saturday, and each week we bring you stories from around the country and around the world. Stories that help you learn, make you smile, catch you by surprise. Please join us every Saturday for the news you need and the stories you won't forget.
Saturday morning from 8 to 10 on WAER.
Delve into the rich tapestry of acoustic-led folk, roots, and Americana music as we welcome back Common Threads here on 88.3 FM WAER. Enjoy national and international acts as well as local artists every Sunday with host Pete Thomas. Whether you're seeking the comfort of timeless classics or contemporary gems and music discovery, don't miss Common Threads Sundays from 2 to 5 exclusively on 88.3 WAER, your local NPR station.
There is a one-stop listen for everything Syracuse athletics.
You got great talent on this offense. Like, you can't go dormant for an entire quarter. And
The Ostrom Avenue podcast provides unique opinions, plus exciting interviews from industry experts.
joined by Georgia Tech play-by-play broadcaster Andy Demetra, Syracuse.com, football beat reporter Emily Laker.
Check out weekly interviews on YouTube and listen at waer.org or wherever you get your podcast.
WAER is always on. Whether you listen to us on air, visit our website, follow us on social media, or check out our podcasts, we are dedicated to bringing you journalism that is important to you. Your support means the world to us. It keeps rigorous journalism, inspired storytelling, and extraordinary music free and accessible to all. Not yet a member? Make your first-time gift online at waer.org.
Tipped around by McLeod. He re-corrals. Naheem throws it off the square and in. Plus a foul.
Naheem McLeod, the big 7'4" skyscraper in New York City, getting 2 points up on the board as Syracuse falls to Texas, 70-66 in the Barclays Center. You're listening to the Double Overtime on WAER. We're taking you for 29 more minutes up until 11. I'm Hudson Ridley alongside Jordan Leonard. Jordan, this was, I guess you could consider, really the first real game of the year. Actually, no, not consider. Throw that at the window. This was the first real game of the year. You can't really count the first three. Last year, in the first quote-unquote real game of the year, Syracuse versus Tennessee, it was kind of a similar picture. Syracuse kept it close in the beginning, which was the opposite. But then at halftime, it was a 3-point game. Tennessee ended up winning 73-56 and blew the doors off of Syracuse. Texas is not the same quality as Tennessee. It's fair to say, the team last year compared to this year's Texas team. But the fact that Syracuse stayed in it a little bit more kind of made me feel good. If it made you feel good, call in 315-443-2011. You can also text 315-556-3929. But you got to like it.
I honestly think last year's game against Tennessee impressed me more than this year's game against Texas, because they were in the game for pretty much the most of it. The last 3 minutes is where Tennessee kind of took over.
Yeah.
And Tennessee, with being a much better team at that point, being ranked inside the top 15, top 25, that was a real test game for Syracuse. So was Texas today. But them being in it for longer, I think is where, and I guess that's not true. They were obviously in it down the stretch against Texas. Them being in the game against Tennessee for longer, I think trumps having to come back against Texas the way they did, and then also lose the game on free throws. I think that also plays a factor.
I think that's fair because Tyler said it differently, but from my vantage point, I know I wasn't there, but I watched the game. I didn't think Texas looked good.
No,
and Texas has not shown anything all year.
They didn't play that well either. Johnson, one of their star recruits, 4 of 18 from the field.
Yeah, and
Imagine
he came
if
in.
he makes more shots.
He came in like a 60% shooter, a 59% three-point shooter. Texas has played one real game before that, and it was a loss against Ohio State in the season opener. It knocked them out of being ranked. Since then, they played Houston Christian, which used to be Houston Baptist. I just found that out today, and that really rocked my world. Chicago State, which, if you don't know anything about the Chicago State program and what they're like, during the pandemic, they were the first team to cancel their games just because they didn't want to play any more basketball. They were that bad. And Mississippi Valley State, that is so bad that on social media they have been blocking out the opponent's scores when they have a highlight. So those are the three teams that Texas played.
You got the research right there.
Hey, that was all off the dome. Those were the three teams that Texas played, and none of them are anywhere near impressive. I think they're all in the bottom 15 on KenPom. This is not a Texas team that is impressive in any regard, and Syracuse really, sticking with them and having to come back, that, I guess you're right. I kind of agree with you. You flipped me. I think Tennessee actually was a little bit more impressive last year.
And I think the seasons are very comparable, too. While Syracuse men's basketball didn't have as close of games to start the year against New Hampshire and Canisius as the first two games were, I mean, they beat New Hampshire by 11. They beat Canisius by 12. They had to come back down 24 to Colgate at halftime just to win that game. So they didn't get off to hot stretches in the first three games last year as well. They come and play a team. Again, Tennessee is much better. They went out to Hawaii, and I think that they showed their toughness a lot more in that game And you could argue, and I can see the argument coming back against Texas, down 11 at half, down 9-0 in the first 3 minutes, having to go to zone to try to get anything going for Syracuse. I could see where that argument's made, but the fact that they stayed in the Tennessee game all the way up until about the 4-minute mark in the second half, that's what impressed me the most about that game again. I think you can be impressed to an extent about Syracuse against Texas, but there's only so much you can be impressed with because of the fact that they had to come all the way back.
Yeah.
And they lost the game on free throws.
Exactly. Because the things that they lost on were so manageable. That's what it was. Like, they controlled the uncontrollables somehow, and they figured out, okay, Texas, here is how we play them. They meshed well. They figured out the defense. Everything worked. Tennessee was just like Dalton Knecht, who just had 38 or 37 points in an NBA game for the Lakers the other night. That's who you had to go up against in Texas. Trey Johnson is good, but he's no Dalton Knecht, rather in Tennessee last year. Trey Johnson for Texas is good, but he's no Dalton Knecht. He's a freshman. He's going to have bad games. He had his worst game as a college basketball player, which was still putting up 16 points?
Dalton Knecht was nasty
shooting.
From 3-point range too.
He was. I mean, this was similar struggles that they had to deal with, but it was on a different scale. And so the fact that Syracuse had to come back from that wide of a margin, you do have to worry about the beginning of the game too.
Yeah,
like
that begs the question: Do you have to change the starting lineup at some point?
Yeah.
I know Jim Boeheim was so against changing the starting lineup. Adrian Autry didn't do it that much last year as well, but if you're starting these games so slow and against a mid-major team, the first 3 games, it doesn't really matter because you're eventually going to come back and win the game like they did. But a game's like against Texas, when you spot them 9 points, it's going to come back to bite you.
Here's the problem. You can make a good starting lineup easily. And I think the idea is there to make a good starting lineup of J.J. Starling at the 1, like we talked about, Chris Bell at the 2, Donnie Freeman at the 3, Jair Davis at the 4, and Lampkin being the distributor at the 5. Here's the issue, though. If that is the starting lineup, then Jaquan Carlos moves to your bench, and then all of a sudden, is Jaquan Carlos the best player you're bringing off the bench?
Well, do you think
it's
that's
probably Elijah Moore, but are you playing him consistently?
Do you
all
think
of a sudden,
that's
the
what he
second
needs,
unit
though?
sucks.
Do you think that's what he needs, though, potentially?
Jaquan Carlos?
To play in the second unit? I mean,
Maybe.
we talk about the transition from Division I. He played great in the exhibitions. Those weren't Division I teams. And he's really struggled to really drive down the lane and get things going. You think he needs to play against potentially a backup point guard to get into a rhythm?
Maybe it's worth a shot. It's not something you do against St. Joe's. This is something you do against, Texas Tech, regardless of which team they play tomorrow. That's not something you do against that team. Probably something you do against a U Albany down the line when, it's not an ACC game or a Power 5 game and it truly matters. So I don't think we're going to see that change yet because the spark off the bench that Jair Davis gives is pretty important. If you look
love
at last
that.
year's squad,
you can't put him in the starting lineup.
It was part of why Malik Brown came off the bench for so long because he was a spark, and Quadir Copeland because he was a spark. And now, if you put Jair Davis in the starting lineup, who's your bench spark? Absolutely nobody, because nobody from that bench can come over and take over a game like you had. Come in and take over a game like you had last year, And you don't want to harp too much on what had been, but when you look at what the starting lineup could be, if you bolster it with some of that explosive talent off the bench, then this team gets elevated to a new level. But the more pieces you move around, the more holes you start to find. And the more holes you start to find in non-conference play, especially against the 3 teams at the beginning of the year, but even against a Texas team who even knows if they're good at all.
Yeah.
If you start to find holes now, when you play Duke, you lost bad last year, that Duke team is different this year. UNC is good this year. It is really going to be a struggle down the stretch.
Yeah, and I think whenever you look at any lineup throughout the entire season so far, it's the forwards. You have to rely on the forwards for Syracuse men's basketball. This team last year, Judah Minch, J.J. Starling, they had the guards to really make it work. But this year, it's got to be the forwards you have to rely on. Chris Bell, even though Tyler Aiken, a pretty bad take in my opinion.
Horrible
taking Chris
take.
Bell off the court. But Chris Bell, Donnie Freeman, Jair Davis is a forward too. Lucas Taylor sure can be, a guard-forward combo, probably more of a guard. But you got to rely on the forwards to really drive this roster and really drive your lineup decisions. And that's why I think, potentially Jaquan Carlos should go to the bench in terms of playing the backup point guard because you can add another forward to that starting lineup.
So now it brings you to the point where you're 4 games in, you're already talking about, whoa, the lineup might need to be changed, and you start to worry a little bit down the stretch, even though the team is 3-1. Last year, the only game they won in the Maui Invitational, the tournament they played in that year, was against Chaminade, which is a Division II program that only plays in that tournament because they host it, and the Silver Swords are not actually a good team. But at this point in the season, now at 3-1, regardless of whether you play Texas Tech or St. Joe's, which at the half right now, St. Joe's is up 45-35. Does tomorrow become a game they have to win? If you think so, call in and tell us 315-443-2011. You can also shoot us a text, 315-556-3929. You only got 20 more minutes to do so please get it in. But Jordan, does it become a must-win?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I'll ask actually back a question to you.
Okay.
I'll answer your question with a question.
Mm-hmm.
Was the Gonzaga, since we're comparing seasons, was the Gonzaga game a must-win last year after losing to Tennessee?
No, but I'll put a caveat on your question back
Okay.
to my question. Gonzaga was way better than either St. Joe's or Texas Tech.
Texas Tech is number 26 in the country and 10th in KenPom.
Exactly, and they're down by 10 at the half to St. Joe's.
Good St. Joe's squad.
It's a good St. Joe's squad.
Eric
Regardless
Reynolds.
of the team that you play tomorrow, they are going to be good. Regardless of the team that you play tomorrow, they will be worse than Gonzaga was last year. So, again, it brings around the question. This is a team where, both of these teams, in theory, if you are the program that you still are in Syracuse, the recruiting has been good. Everything has been solid. Where's the disconnect? And if you're the program that you are supposed to be in Syracuse, yes, tomorrow actually is a must-win because you cannot go back-to-back invitational tournaments losing without a win except over Chaminade, Syracuse, and Chaminade.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to the Barclays tournament, years past, it was either a loss or a really close win in overtime. And I agree. It is a must-win, and particularly because of how they played in the first 3 games. You're thinking making the NCAA tournament. Adriatri said it before the season started. You got to win games. Yes, you have to win games, but you have to look good in winning games. They didn't look good in the first 3 games. They got all the wins, sure. When you don't look good in those games, you got to win big games like a Texas Tech or a St. Joe's. And I know declaring Texas Tech and St. Joe's as a big game, not necessarily a popular take per se, but if you beat teams on a neutral court, like a St. Joe's that has a really good chance of going to the NCAA tournament, win their conference, a Texas Tech Big 12 team almost on the precipice of the AP poll, that puts you in better graces to the selection committee when it comes down to it, because when they go back and look at your early season and they see these close wins against Youngstown State, Colgate, Lemoyne, they see a loss to Texas, but you respond with a win against the Texas Tech St. Joe's, I think that puts you in the better graces of the tournament committee and also gives you momentum going into an ACC matchup against Notre Dame and a Tennessee ACC-SEC challenge.
Yeah, I mean, that is true, but it also matters how you perform in those games.
It all stacks up, but it starts with the game that's next.
Yeah, you have to have something to spark you. I think regardless, if they win tomorrow or not, another close game, it really doesn't do anything for this program. If they win it, I think it gives a little bit of a boost, but it's like, okay, they've been playing close all year. Yeah, they win another close game. If they come out of the gate firing and they win by 8 points, that is a program trajectory-changing win, which for some of you who have been listening to Syracuse basketball for a long time on 88.3 WAER, and you hear, oh, you beat St. Joe's to move to 4-1 on the season, and you go, that's a program trajectory-changing win, that might give you a really bad feeling in your stomach. But that is the point that this program is at. So if you win tomorrow by a little bit, then the narrative still just becomes, okay, they play close games pretty
consistently. At least it pushes it back off, though. Like, if you lose, the narrative changes like the snap of a finger.
If they lose big time, then the narrative is...
Oh, well, if they lose big time, there's a lot of problems on the hill.
If you lose big time, then it's, okay, well, Kai and Anthony, start the timer now before he comes.
Well, I was going to say, everyone's counting down to basketball season, even though the football team 7-3. they
Yeah,
lose.
switch football brain back.
They're already looking forward to lacrosse. Or
That is true.
They'll switch football for a couple weeks, go to the bowl game potentially, then lacrosse season on the horizon.
If there's
But
any team that can still win a national championship at Syracuse, it is Syracuse men's lacrosse.
Might I just say, I think also what contributes to my nervousness for tomorrow, at least in the Syracuse perspective, is how good St. Joe's is playing. Because I would think Texas Tech going into the game would get the win. They're the better team in terms of the AP rankings and KenPom efficiency. But the fact that both of these teams are playing and St. Joe's is winning over a team that Texas Tech's supposed to be better, that puts a little bit of fear in my eye if I'm a Syracuse fan going into tomorrow's game.
I mean, it should. Both of these teams are better than Syracuse. You can say that objectively. Both of them are. Texas might be the third best team in this tournament. Syracuse might be the fourth best team in this tournament when it's all said and done. So it really it's frustrating. It is, because if you look at where this team used to be and what it used to stack up against, and you do a state of the program now, so many pieces used to be in place. And you wonder, what's the disconnect? Because the recruiting has been solid. That really has not been a whole lot of change. What Syracuse used to rely on was those Central New York stars, those 3 stars, coming out of nowhere and becoming these fantastic players for Syracuse. That's not really fully the case anymore, especially not in the Autry era. They're going out swinging. The recruiting is good. 4 stars, 5 stars, bringing them in. But where at this point do you end up in the program is my concern.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's going to be an interesting game tomorrow, and of course we got all the coverage here on WAER, but it's going to be really a season-defining game. Even though it's 5 games in, it's going to really tell you what Syracuse can be rest of non-con and in conference play the entire season.
Exactly. Well, you've heard a lot from us tonight. We only have one more thing to say, so don't go anywhere. Our final words will be after a short break here on the Double Overtime on WAER.
Start your Sunday mornings Gospel from 6 to 8 a.m. right here on WAER. Hosted by Cora Thomas, the program features some of the best local and national gospel artists. You'll hear everyone from Daryl Coley to the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir to the Winans family. More information is available online at WAER.org. Join us Sunday mornings from 6 to 8 a.m. for Sunday Morning Gospel on 88.3 FM WAER.
Whether you enjoy the funky sounds of James Brown or the pristine vocals of Aretha Franklin, we hope you'll choose WAER for your fix of jazz. Weeknights on WAER feature specialty jazz programs, and throughout the overnight, Pub Jazz curates a playlist of jazz favorites for you to enjoy. Tune in at 88.3 FM and WAER.org.
Hi, I'm Laurel Wamsley, and I cover personal finance for NPR. That means I report on some of the questions that might keep you or your loved ones up at night. Like, will I ever be able to buy a home? As interest rates drop, where should I put my money? Economic headlines can be confusing, but NPR is here to help you make sense of them. To support this coverage, please donate to the station today. Here's how.
Visit WAER.org to get started today.
We know you've got
On the next Putumayo World Music Hour,
We'll be serenaded by some of the world's finest balladeers. I'm Dan Storper.
and I'm Rosalie Howarth. Pack your bags and join us for World Troubadours, the next Putumayo World Music Hour.
Sunday night at 11 on WAER.
With so much going on, it can be hard to keep up with who's doing what and why. I'm Aisha Roscoe, host of Weekend Edition Sunday, letting you know whether it's news from across the country and the world, or a deep conversation about a novel, movie, or music, we got you. Grab your coffee or your earbuds and tune in to Weekend Edition from NPR News.
Sunday morning from 8 to 10 on WAER, your local NPR station from the Newhouse School at Syracuse University.
On last week's Wait Wait, we asked Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer if she was the only sitting governor to have a rap song written about her.
That wouldn't surprise me. Have you met them? I'm going to get in trouble now.
On Peter Sagal, we'll try to get the stars of Somebody Somewhere, Bridget Everett and Jeff Hiller, to get themselves in hot water. That's on our intentionally provocative news quiz from NPR.
Saturday morning at 11 on 88.3 FM WAER.
Selling a vehicle on your own, especially nowadays, can be a hassle, but donating it to WAER couldn't be easier. Simply provide a clean title and we'll take care of the pickup and donation receipt. To get started, visit WAER.org.
Who's gonna drive you home tonight?
Delve into the rich tapestry of acoustic-led folk, roots, and Americana music as we welcome back Common Threads here on 88.3 FM WAER. Enjoy national and international acts as well as local artists every Sunday with host Pete Thomas. Whether you are seeking the comfort of timeless classics or contemporary gems and music discovery, don't miss Common Threads Sundays from 2 to 5 exclusively on 88.3 WAER, your local NPR station.
You know a good story when you hear it. Makes you feel, laugh, think. Sometimes you get a little teary. I'm Scott Simon, host of Weekend Edition Saturday, and each week we bring you stories from around the country and around the world. Stories that help you learn, make you smile, catch you by surprise. Please join us every Saturday for the news you need and the stories you won't forget.
Saturday morning from 8 to 10 on WAER.
Why are there so many songs about rainbows?
This week on Bullseye, we'll talk with songwriter Paul Williams about writing hits for The Carpenters, David Bowie, and Kermit the Frog, and about the time he appeared on Johnny Carson's show dressed as an orangutan.
But I called Doc Severance and I said, Doc, I'm coming in. I'm in full 8 makeup.
That's on the next Bullseye from MaximumFun.org and NPR.
Sunday morning at 11 on WAER.
Texas all over Syracuse and Brooklyn as Bell makes his way down the lane, rolls it through, and the foul. Bell found the lane, he raced to the light, and he put it in the hole +1.
Welcome back into the double overtime here on WAER. 70-66, Syracuse loses to Texas down at the Barclays Center. We got you all the way up until 11 p.m. here on the double overtime. Hudson and I, time for our final words. And Hudson, I'll start first. And we talked about it all show. The defense. It was good in the second half. It was better in the second half. Not so good in the first half. They played a lot of zone. They played man to start, got absolutely torched for the first couple minutes. And my take is this team is good enough on offense where all they need to do is play intense defense. They need to play middle tier to upper middle tier ACC defense to make it to the NCAA tournament. They have enough offensive prowess in Donnie Freeman, Eddie Lampkin, J.J. Starling, Chris Bell, even though Tyler Aiken doesn't believe so. They have enough offensive weapons, and they can score enough points in these games as long as they play defense. Also, if they take up the intensity on the defensive side, which they did in the second half today, it translates to the offense. I think their offense actually plays better when they play better defense, which is not a hot take when it comes to any basketball team. That's usually what happens. But when this team plays defense, they can make it to an NCAA tournament. They're definitely a bubble team. They can make it to the dance, and they can potentially win a game in the dance as well. But if they don't play defense, this team is going packing even earlier than they were last year. They were out, by the time the ACC tournament came around, they were really kind of out anyway. They'll be out in the month of February at the beginning if they don't pick it up on the defensive side on a more consistent basis.
The one issue with that is that the only stat that you can't measure, sometimes they lack in the most, and it's heart on the defensive end. That is really the only thing I would say with that. My final word, Jordan. This team plays close games. However, I really don't think that changes much of anything. I think when you look at it down the stretch, this team might not be good enough in crunch time against real teams to get it done. A lot of that is the free throw shooting. They couldn't get it done at the line tonight. Some of it is the defensive and rebounding lapses. This team can play in the middle sometimes. This team can play in the last 10 minutes of the first half, in the last 10 minutes of the second half, or rather, first 10 minutes of the second half, and get this game close. They can get games close. That is what they do. They've played 4 close games against opponents that are wildly, wildly different. But now, does it really change much enough for them to elevate from what they were last year, a lower tier, bottom of the bubble team, to mid-tier, high-tier bubble team kind of eking in? And I really don't think it does. If the free throw shooting improves, that gets them to a point where maybe they're comfortable enough to become that team that takes over. But how do you improve free throw shooting when all you can do is go in the gym and shoot? I mean, that's in God's hands. Only God. I mean, really, who knows? At this point, I think Syracuse, like you said, is a defense away. I think Syracuse is free throw shooting away from being at that point. But can they get there? That is a massive, massive question mark.
And in terms of the close games, it's the alpha. Like, who are you giving the ball to at the end of the game? And that's still a big question on the Syracuse squad. And, everyone harps on Judah Mintz for sometimes being a ball hog. But he led that SU offense. You knew who was going to control the ball when you needed to score, whether he was going to score it or dish it off. And this Syracuse team, theoretically, it should be J.J. Starling. And I'm not saying it can't, but they gotta define somebody as that go-to player, because I don't think they know, and they need one going down the stretch, someone to run the offense through in the last couple minutes.
I think J.J. Starling is ready for that. I really do. I think he plays consistent enough to be ready for that. He just needs that extra spark inside of him. We saw that spark down the stretch against Youngstown State. How do you bring that spark out of a guy in overtime and in double overtime when he really showed up there? How do you bring that and you put him in it full game? If that happens to J.J. Starling, if he has that spark full game, if he plays inspired the entire game, he is the alpha of this team. And when he plays inspired, in general, he's the alpha of this team. But when he doesn't, when he thinks of himself like he did last year, where, okay, Judah's taking the ball for now, I go stand off here. Someone else is taking the ball, maybe they'll kick to me, I'll do a little dribble drive or I'll pull up from 3. Then he starts to lose the point a little bit. But when he locks in and he becomes that guy that can really take them down the stretch and goes end to end, bucket after bucket after bucket, like Judah Mintz did, he can do that, but it comes with getting the fire inside him to that point.
And I think you saw that down the stretch against Youngstown State, too.
You did, yeah.
I mean, he took over that game along with Eddie Lampkin to eventually get the win in double overtime. And maybe that's one of the benefits, at least of the beginning of the season for Syracuse. Obviously, you don't want close games against the mid-majors, but they're learning how to play in close games. They didn't get the win today, but they're certainly learning how to play close games, and that can only benefit them in ACC play.
No, exactly. If they play close games and they consistently pull them out with wins, and you hate on the 3 wins that they had at the beginning, they played in close games and they won all of them. They almost won in a close game here against Texas. That is the difference from last year, where they would get the doors blown off them when they get down. Now they come back. Is it enough to get them over the hump when ACC play starts? Is it enough for them to really do anything of note in the NCAA this year? That remains a big question mark, but at least they've made a step in the right direction, maybe.
We'll have to wait and see. That about does it for the double overtime. Hudson and I talked about it. Potential, maybe must-win game tomorrow against the loser of Texas Tech and St. Joe's. They're playing right now. St. Joe's on top, 48-43 at the under-16 timeout. Again, the loser takes on Syracuse tomorrow, Friday, November 22nd. Tip-off at 7 down from the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. Countdown to tip-off starts at 6:30. The double overtime all the way up until 11 p.m. with Luke Burgess, A.J. Myers breaking it all down. Our next football broadcast this weekend, SU takes on UConn, a tough Huskies team, on Saturday, November 23rd. Kickoff is at noon. Countdown to kickoff starts at 11:30. The double overtime all the way up until 5 p.m. with our host Alex Ramol and Jonah Weintraub. A lot of basketball, a lot of football still in tune for this weekend. Syracuse falls 70-66 to Texas in the first day of the Empire Classic down in the Barclays Center. That about does it for the double overtime. Before we send you away, though, got some thank yous to hand out. Our producer, Adam Gotkin, our engineer, Jonah Weintraub, our W8ER Sports Talk reporter, Tyler Aiken, fired up, bringing all the hot takes and our WAER Sports Talk desk. Jake Klein, Dan Shalom, Nick King, all doing great work tonight here on the Double Overtime. That does it. Hudson Ridley, I'm Jordan Leonard. Syracuse falls to Texas 70-66.